Thanks so much, Uncle. And as we are gathered here today on Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country, I think it's a beautiful moment for us to all take a breath, take a moment to connect ourselves to this country. We may have travelled from really far to be here. And as we are gathering today and across tomorrow to share stories, come together, share ideas, we are a small part of a continuing tradition that has been on this country for thousands and thousands of years. So I guess as we all step into our work, step into the amazing people that we're going to hear from today and across tomorrow, thinking about the women who've come before us, First Nations women of this country, and honour their work and their wisdom as we move together. So my name's Tasha, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm a member of ERA's YWAG, so Young Women's Advisory Council, and I've been asked to MC today alongside Bree.
Hi everyone, my name's Bree. I also go by she, her, and it's my absolute pleasure today to be introducing Helen Daly-Fisher. I feel like she doesn't need an introduction, but she gets one anyway. She is the convener of the Equality Rights Alliance, of one of the 6 national women's alliances advising the federal government on policy relating to women's economic security and leadership. Helen started out as a solicitor, initially in private practice, before spending a decade in the community legal sector, practicing disability discrimination law, tenancy law, employment law, and social security law. Helen is a regular participant in a range of international human rights processes, including the UN and the ESCAP, drafting sessions of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. She has coordinated the NGO delegations of the UN Commission on the Status of Women for New York for more than 10 years and regularly leads or contributes on the drafting of shadow reports on various human rights treaties.
And alongside all the amazing official things that Helen's done, on a personal note, and I'm sure for many people in this room, Helen's also been like a feminist mama to lots of us. We wouldn't be here today without the work that she has done and the way that she has led and also created space for those coming behind her. So please make Helen really, really welcome. Thank you.
They didn't tell me they were going to do that, and I'm going to cry. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to you all. It's fabulous to see you here. It's fabulous to see that we've actually already filled the room. Way! I was expecting a few more people coming in late, so thank you very much for making the massive effort to be here. I'd like to begin by thanking Uncle Perry Wandon for that very generous welcome, and to note that when we spoke to him before the event, he said, why do they keep sending men to these? It's like, no, because we kind of need blokes involved. We're not at all unhappy about this. And I'd like to add my own acknowledgement of the elders of this land, past and present. Naam is unceded Aboriginal land, always was, always will be. And I would like to acknowledge that we're also joined today by Jocelyn Eads-Tass and Wendy Anders, sitting here from our sister alliance, the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Women's Alliance. I particularly am singling you two out because you've taught me so much. And so it's a real joy to me that you're here with us today. I'd also like to acknowledge that we're going to be joined by a number of people over the course of the next day and a half. In particular, we're going to be joined by the Victorian Public Sector Gender Equality Commissioner, Dr. Nikki Vincent. And the reason I particularly want to single her out is because the work that is being done here by the Victorian Government on integrating gender analysis into public policy and into public life is a critical example for the rest of us as we consider the implementation of this national strategy on gender equality. So we're looking forward to hearing from Dr. Vincent this afternoon. We'll also be joined tomorrow by Padma Raman, the Executive Director of the Office for Women, who is sitting at the sort of focal point of that work around the national strategy, and so it's going to be fabulous to hear from her tomorrow. In March this year, as you'll all remember, the Minister for Women and Minister for Finance, Katie Gallagher, launched Australia's first national strategy on gender equality for 30 years. The last time we had anything remotely like this, Paul Keating was PM, and the Labor Party had just endorsed a target of pre-selecting women in 35% of winnable seats by 2002. Working for Women aims to achieve an Australia where people are safe, treated with respect, have choices, have access to resources and equal outcomes, no matter their gender. It's a 10-year plan with a review in the middle at about 2029. The strategy emphasises the benefit of a gender equal Australia to all people and highlights the negative effects of gender inequality on men and boys, as well as on women and girls and other people who are marginalised by gender. It also notes the need to identify and address intersectional forms of discrimination and disadvantage. And then the strategy names 5 priority areas: gender-based violence, unpaid and paid care, economic equality and security, health, and leadership, representation and decision-making. A key element of the strategy is its focus on addressing gendered norms and stereotypes as critical barriers to gender equality. And it's that last element of the strategy which is the reason we've decided to hold this symposium. Addressing negative gender norms and stereotypes is indeed a critical step towards achieving gender equality, but it's not a task that can be achieved by government alone. Changing norms and values requires a willingness by individuals and communities to understand and to want to shift beliefs which are sometimes sitting right at the core of individual and community identities. The strategy is predicated on the idea that gender equality can only be achieved through concerted effort from institutions, organisations, communities and individuals. It's effectively a call to action for the whole community. And that's a big ask. I mean, when I think about the mood in our communities right now, the image that comes to mind is not willing people joining cheerfully together to work towards common goals. We live in a time of division and abrasive self-defence, particularly among those who hold disproportionate amounts of power or privilege. It's a time when public discourse has a combative quality, and it's occurring through media channels which are not encouraging nuance or empathy. On the positive side, there are some really significant gains currently being made across a wide range of sectors and institutions, and it's interesting to speculate to what extent is the current mood of contention due to the fact that some of those gains are really quite fundamental to changing the way our structures and societies work. The work done by many advocates and organisations, including Equality Rights Alliance and its members, to build the case for gender-responsive budgeting has finally started to bear fruit. We're seeing a greater understanding of the need to use gender impact analysis to highlight gender bias within the development of government policy, both here in Victoria and at the federal level. And we're starting to see interest percolating out to other states and territories. Although we're yet to make significant inroads into preventing gender-based violence, we're seeing strong public engagement in the issue as women take to the streets and some men take their first tentative steps towards identifying their role in preventing gender-based violence. And I just want to acknowledge here that we're meeting today, one day after an event that took place in Canberra yesterday, run by Senator David Pocock. It was an event at Parliament House aimed at male parliamentarians, and it was designed to start that conversation about helping men to see their place in the discussion in a way that's actually constructive. Small steps. The level of female representation in our Parliament is currently the highest it's ever been. And our representation in the Senate is currently the highest of any House of Parliament in the world. And I have to acknowledge that on Monday, of course, we saw Sam Mostyn sworn in as our second female head of state, which is a bit of a moment. And meanwhile, there are many advocacy organisations, researchers, business leaders, public servants and parliamentarians working on different aspects of the gender equality problem. Here, in this room, over the course of the next day and a half, we'll have representatives from organisations of business leaders who are working on women's leadership and gender pay gaps. We have researchers who are building and analysing the data on everything from best practice time use survey techniques to human rights education to gender and climate change policy and analysing the gender impact of legislation. We're joined by government officials and public servants working on gendering public policy on a scale that's never been previously attempted in Australia. And of course, we have the feminist and community organisations which provide both the backbone and the soul of ERA, as well as the practical solutions and the grassroots responses that we need to the damage that's done by patriarchy. But working together to implement the national strategy on gender equality means working together. For a range of reasons, the broad range of work that I've just highlighted is often siloed and difficult to see, even between those silos. And that's where the role that I've been privileged to play for the last 12 years starts to come into play. Being convener of ERA has given me the opportunity to meet and work with a wide range of feminists, activists, business leaders, academics, community leaders and politicians, all of whom are working away at their own corner of this jigsaw that we call gender equality. And now that we have this call to coordinated action in the form of a national strategy, it's time for us to step outside our silos and start to become acquainted with each other's work. Our aim at this symposium is to use ERA's cross-sector experience to bring some of those different actors together, to hear about each other's work, to identify common interests and concerns, and to start building the relationships that we're going to need if we're actually going to realise the ambition of working for women. This symposium is intended as the start of a conversation between 4 different sectors: government, business, community and academia. We hope that it'll encourage you to consider your role in implementing working for women. Over the next day and a half, we're going to hear about some of the challenges we face, such as Rebecca Huntley's research into attitudinal resistance to gender equality, and the panel tomorrow on the resistance to human rights narratives here in Australia. We'll identify and consider some of the key areas for action which arise out of the national strategy, such as the gendering of climate policy in this country and supporting women's leadership. We'll also consider some of the structural changes that will be needed to support our work, such as the introduction of gender impact analysis in the development of policy and laws, and also the need for intergenerational dialogue, and the need to reconsider how we organise and support our feminist activism. Back in May, I wrote an article for Broad Agenda about the announcement that Sam Mostyn would be our next Governor-General. And I wrote then that while Australians may have the best intentions in the world to achieve gender equality, until we're doing gender equality, intentions don't actually mean a thing. Although I'm obviously very pleased about Sam's appointment, in a way, it's not the first or second woman in a role that actually matters. It's the 9th or the 20th or whichever appointment which becomes the one that we don't really think to comment on because it's become the norm. Working for women gives us an opportunity, a trigger, to think and act differently, to achieve the kind of deep social and cultural change which is needed to achieve a fairer world. If gender equality is going to become business as usual for everyone, then we need a common language and we need working relationships which allow us to strategise and to implement our solutions across sectors and across our communities. Which brings me to the second reason for this symposium, which is that after 23 years of feminist advocacy, the Equality Rights Alliance will be wound up on the 30th of November this year. For many of us who participated in ERA's work, this is a time of reflection and sadness. ERA has given us place to explore ideas, to build connections and understanding, to challenge our assumptions and to raise our voices. The ERA staff, our Young Women's Advisory Group and our 75 member organisations have worked together on submissions, we've advocated to parliamentarians, we've written letters and articles, we've conducted surveys, we've published results, we've assembled international delegations and we've educated each other. The loss of that network of support, expertise and energy will be felt. But the reality is that the work of building gender equality is neither linear nor static. Iterative change, and sometimes when called for, radical change, is an essential element of feminist advocacy over time. The end of ERA creates space for us to consider what should come next. What is needed to properly support feminist advocacy in Australia? At a time when the federal government is calling for a whole-of-community response to gender equality, can we identify the structures, the tools and the resources that we need to answer that call? Before I leave you with those questions, I'd like to acknowledge that this symposium itself is a tiny miracle. Neither Maddie or I have ever organised a conference before, and so we didn't know it couldn't be done in 5 weeks. Ignorance is bliss, and apparently it's also really important if you're going to attempt the impossible. This event has come together because every speaker I approached to participate said yes. One of the hardest parts of the organisation was limiting the scope of the agenda. We seem to be dripping in experts and talented change makers with important work to highlight. As we combined organising this symposium with the first steps towards winding up ERA, I was somewhat reassured by the realisation that Australia has this massive wealth of feminist talent. I particularly want to thank Vicky, Kate and Rachel from YWCA Australia for their patient support of this process. Thanks to the many ERA member reps and other friends who've volunteered to participate in panels or to moderate or to help in other ways. And to our YWAG members, particularly Tasha and Bree, for taking on the MC roles. And thanks also to Tanya and Marie from Gender Lens Australia for partnering with us to provide our networking event this evening. And above all, thanks to Maddie, who's standing up the back there, for keeping you cool, hanging on for dear life, and always asking the right question at the right moment. I hope that this symposium gives you the space, the information, and the stimulation that you need to look up to the horizon for a moment, to see your work in its broader context, and to ask yourself, what's next? Thank you.